I had met Fred years before where I worked. His Alzheimer's-stricken mother was on my ward, and when I came into her room to check her medications had been taken and to measure her blood pressure, Fred was sitting by her bed. I could not see much of him since he was backlit by the setting sun. Maybe it was the smell of his aftershave, which reminded me of my father's, a fairly standard odour of bergamot, sandalwood and leather. Perhaps it was the calm he exuded, or one of these chemical reactions that, as I was wrapping the blood pressure cuff around his mother's wrists, set my pulse racing for seconds on end. I have no clue what Fred was feeling. A few weeks later, when we were sitting on a bench on the promenade after dinner at a restaurant, he said, "I felt drawn to you from the first moment." He did not say, "I fell in love with you," only, "I felt drawn to you." I knew nothing about him. I believe it was Fred's first visit to his mother that afternoon. The old woman could no longer recognize people's faces. Day after day she would sit either in her television armchair in front of the lit-up screen or in a wheelchair by the window, getting wheeled onto the balcony or into the care home's garden when the weather was good. She lived in a world we could not see into, spoke to nobody, never let us know what was going on inside. I had abandoned all attempts to start a conversation with her. Only a soft toy she held in her arms the whole day, an ugly, dishevelled thing only just identifiable as a black cat, got her speaking sometimes. When she did speak, she would babble away, incomprehensible to anyone there listening. Sometimes it sounded tender, sometimes sad. Once, when she flung the cat far away from her, surprisingly furious. Fred's mother did not stay long with us in the home. She died one night when I was on shift. It had not been foreseeable. Apart from her advanced dementia, she had no serious illnesses. While she was spending the last weeks of her life with us, Fred and I were already in a relationship. I was about to go into retirement and he was 68. A year before we met, Fred had separated from his wife. He was living in the centre of town, in a building that was his business premises too. I visited him there a few weeks after our first encounter. He had invited me to visit and hugged me when I came. He handed me a bouquet of flowers and showed me around the flat, which had a living room, a large terrace, a bedroom with bed and cupboard, a bathroom and a kitchen in gleaming chrome. That kitchen looked just as unused as the living room, in which, apart from an enormous TV set, there was not much more than an upholstered suite plus table, the table laden with newspapers alongside a stack of unopened Post, 2 glasses and a bottle of champagne in a cooler. That was it. No pictures, no books, no potted plants, not even an ashtray. I sat down on one side of the sofa, Fred on the other. He uncorked the bottle and filled the glasses to the brim. We toasted each other and drank. "I'm going for a smoke," I said after a while, and stood up, shrugged on my coat and stepped onto the terrace. It was winter, and a grey bank of clouds hung over the lake to the north. I was freezing, but stayed until the cigarette was burnt down to the filter. When I came back, Fred was still sitting in the same place. He was wearing suit trousers, light brown leather slippers, and a white shirt. When he visited in my flat, he would arrive in shabby trousers of some sort, shirt and pullover, chunky shoes. He would make himself comfortable, stretch out on the sofa, drawing his feet up onto the seat or putting them on the coffee table. Now we were both sitting there, each sinking into one of the soft seats of the enormous couch, casting about for topics for a conversation, constantly interrupting each other for sheer diffidence. Progressively, we emptied the whole bottle. We drank to fill out the silence, nibbled the nuts Fred had served in a bowl, talked about this and that, and while watching television. I kept on getting up and going onto the terrace for a smoke. I was meant to stay over at Fred's that night, that was the plan, but I wanted to go home. Down in the side street where the door to Fred's office was, a car drove past now and then. I stood there, watching the wisps of smoke. Once or twice I turned around to look into the living room, at Fred sitting on the couch. He was in the same posture I left him in a few minutes before. immobile, his gaze fixed straight ahead. It looked as though time had come to a standstill while I was absent from that curtainless room. I had no idea what I was afraid of. I was seeing Fred in his white shirt sitting in his flat, that was all. Below, another car drove past. It was the third since I had lit my last cigarette, which was now half smoked. If another car drives past before it is finished, I thought, everything will be all right. But neither did a car drive past, nor did I have a clue what was supposed to be all right. Back in the living room, I explained to Fred I wanted to go home, but did not say why. Since he had drunk too much to drive himself, he ordered a taxi. He came downstairs with me, opened the door when the car drew up. We did not hug as we usually did when we parted. The taxi turned around in the yard and came past the entry before driving back onto the road. Fred was standing there in the light coming from above the door. His face was almost as white as his shirt. You'll not see him again, I thought, when I got home that night.